I get asked all the time, like, okay, like, were you abused? Were you hit? Were you molested? Like, no, 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 no. I felt completely lost. Who was Melissa? Who was Melissa going to be? What is Melissa like? And I dedicated myself to parties, smoking. It's your friend. It's there to comfort you when no one else is. And trying to find the best drugs, mushrooms, crack, meth, and all the weed. End up around gangs and been arrested 12 different times. Going into drug court. I did a lot of stupid things to go down the dark path because I needed to feel the actual consequences of it. Was going to kill me. There was a wall, and that's the last thing I remember. I recently went out with a friend, and she was surprisingly interested in my addiction story. I touched on it in previous reflections, and I thought I would talk about it today because it may help someone else. This is my story. I don't have any opinions on or judgments. I hold judgment on people who are in the middle of an addiction. Of course, if I have somebody that's actively using in my life that is displaying addictive behaviors, I try to set up boundaries and limit interaction and limit exposure to that risk, obviously for selfish reasons, but also for the addict as well, which I think is sometimes difficult for the family and people close to and people that love the addict have a hard time saying no and stop rescuing them. And I hope that my story is a demonstration as to how not helping someone is actually helping someone when they're in their addiction, even though it can be scary, and the thoughts that the family members think, or at least I'm told the family members think. Well, I'll talk about those thoughts that come up for people. Wow, this is just really so glad I checked. I had like the biggest piece of hair in my eyeball. So I didn't have a bad childhood. I grew up in the middle class for the most part, or pretty like solid in the middle class. Obviously we had our struggles. I think most middle class families do. I think most middle class families, if the parents are married, they fight over finances. They work a lot, and maybe the kids go to daycare or, but I think, most classes go through that. We're trying to think of all the typical things that I might have not liked, or some people would consider bad. But for the most part, my parents were married the entire time. They still are today. And I grew up in a little town called Ojai. Not Ohio, Ojai, O-J-A-I. A very quaint little town in California. It's a valley about 20 minutes east of the beach in Ventura County. And absolutely loved my childhood. I have fond memories of growing up in, open spaces and riding horses, and we had ponds by our house, and I would go catch tadpoles, and I had this whole system of frogs and tadpoles and crawdads in my backyard. Then probably around puberty, maybe. I'm trying to think of when I started changing. I think in 6th grade, because I remember walking to my friend's house after 6th grade, elementary school, and starting to wanna like smoke cigarettes, maybe try a little weed, maybe try a little sip of alcohol here and there. And I remember stealing cigarettes from my friend's mom who smoked. And back then, like, I had so many moms, like my friends' moms, they would just drive you around in the car. Of course, my mom didn't. My mom was very, like, health conscious. She didn't get everything right, and my dad certainly didn't get everything right about health. But looking back, it's kind of funny. This defines their personalities a little bit. But my dad, when the margarine craze came out, he said, F that, it's butter, like we're doing butter only. We're not getting fake butter. And I remember my mom trying to get margarine and he like threw it out. He's like, no, we don't do this. It was like sacrilegious in our house. And now everyone knows about, butter being healthier than margarine and, these natural oils. And then my mom, she was always big on protein. She was always like, eat your protein first. You need protein, 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 protein. And she really drilled that into my head. And lo and behold, that's kind of been a major principle in my dietary life up until today. So looking back, I believe things changed for me in 6th grade. Started changing. First started out with, stealing cigarettes from my friend's mom. And like I said before, back then, the moms would just drive you around and chain smoke in the car with you in the car and, ashtrays in the car. And just kind of funny, those personalities that I remember. Where my mom was very strict about secondhand smoke and thirdhand smoke. And she knew all about that even back then. But at that time, I remember, so this was when also my interest in music. So music was a pretty big deal. It always has been a very big deal in my life, even as a little kid. But I borrowed my musical taste from my brother. He listened to U2, Billy Joel, REM, of course, and Queen, a lot of, very classical bands, classical style. And I remember coming home, I don't know if this is really that relevant. It's more of like a cultural reference of me. Just one thing I really loved about that time is we would come home from 6th grade, sit in my friend's room and watch MTV. And we'd watch all the music videos, and every day there was it felt like every day, but it was probably once a week. It was probably that Tuesday, because I think that's when new music dropped and new movies dropped. It was something super cool coming out. I mean, that was when 9 Inch Nails were big, Marilyn Manson, Eminem, Nirvana, of course, Sublime. It was it was like right around when Bradley died. No Doubt was starting, No Doubt has some ties to Sublime, and she was starting to break through. And then it was Gavin, her boyfriend, from Bush. I'm not a big, their music is fine, but I ended up really focusing on fringe genres, I guess, after that point. So I got introduced to all these new types of music, obviously through MTV, and really enjoyed all the variants of all these different types of music and the subcultures. I just always found that so interesting. And I think that was a big part of my finding my identity at that time. Just really looking elsewhere outside of my family for who was Melissa going to be? What is Melissa like? And these were questions that were really starting to come up for me in 6th grade. Then 7th grade, I was still pretty straight and narrow, but I was certainly starting to get different CDs. I was starting to find punk rock music, really poppy punk rock music, probably at that time. I think the most hardcore probably my taste got was like NoFX or something like that, and Bouncing Souls. I think I found like Punkorama 3 had just come out at that time, so I was going through all the Punkorama disc sets and really listening to all of those. And again, probably the biggest trauma that had happened to me at this point was my parents had owned a Sears store in our town, and it was a catalog store. And instead of just people coming in and ordering from a catalog, they had bought inventory to bring into the store so that they could sell it to people immediately. And my dad would sell them to have them delivered and installed, and he would do the delivery and installation. And sometimes he would throw that in for free if you take it today, kind of thing. And they were doing really well, or they were starting to do well, and Sears made a decision to get rid of their catalog stores, which, looking back, okay, that was a bad business decision for Sears, right? Then Amazon came in, and like catalog store, they might, if they would have kept that business model, they might be doing better today. But again, that was a point where Sears came in and told my parents that, sorry, you bought this franchise, but we're taking it away, and now you don't have jobs, basically, and good luck figuring out how you're going to provide for your family and pay back this loan, because they took out a second mortgage on the house. So my mom really got fearful, and even though my dad really went back to work, and I saw him work very hard, and at that point he had even worked through some Christmases, and I don't remember that being a bad thing. I remember my brain said, cool, my dad's working on Christmas, I know he gets paid extra for working on Christmas, so that means I'm gonna get presents. Kids are pretty selfish minded and I mean adults too, but and then I also had the thought, I remember telling my mom, since dad's working on Christmas, why don't we just delay Christmas till like around New Year's? You guys will get better deals because everything's going to be on sale, and we can all get more stuff. We can all get more toys if we do it that way. So I've always been kind of a value seeker, looking at the value of things. So that was probably like the most traumatic thing. My parents fighting about money, my mom and my dad, my mom like at one point like threw a shoe at my dad about something, and then she stormed off and stuff like that. And then everybody would make up, and nobody really went to bed angry. Everybody always said they were sorry. Everybody stated it was decently healthy. My parents tried to be decently healthy emotionally, and always state that they were sorry and state what their wrongdoing was, or what their part of the disruption was for that moment. Because the thought is that everybody has a responsibility in that exchange, right? So that was probably the most traumatic thing that had happened to me up until this point. Of course, there's other reasons why I probably tended to go down the dark path. There's some like kind of generational patterns, and I talked about this with a Reiki practitioner, and I'm going to probably talk about that next. So I'll try not to get too much into my opinions on Reiki and like what I got out of it, what I think it's useful for me, and what that is. I think a lot of it was generational patterns. Like my parents both had abandonment issues. Their dads both died. When my mom's dad died when she was 18, and my dad's dad died when he was 18. And it was just a very pivotal point in most people's lives. That's when they become an adult, and just getting that unexpectedly ripped away from you at that age. They were both very unexpected deaths. So they kind of have that similar trauma that they bonded over, and then a history of addiction on both sides, on my mom's side and on my dad's side. So there's just some dysfunctional kind of passive aggressive, not confrontational, and then not confrontational, and then you have to read into the unspoken stuff, which I think every family probably deals with, but just definitely some patterns there that are subtle, but they are there and can be dysfunctional. And I think I inherited some of those patterns just from being around. And I'm sure I'm passing on patterns to my kids that are going to screw them up. So no judgment there on my parents. They did the best they could. And that's very, very obvious based off of their, looking back and their effort. But I get asked all the time, like, okay, like, were you abused? Were you hit? Were you molested? Like, no. I just had a very, very happy childhood. I think I am I don't know what you want to say, like an old soul, or just want to live a very rich life. Not rich as far as money, although that's nice too, because it allows you to do more things in this realm, but I wanted to experience stuff, I wanted to experience art firsthand. I wanted to experience music firsthand. I wanted to be a part of those, parties and around people and have fun and be spontaneous and see how far I could push it. One thing about myself is that, that I've learned through addiction is that I go hard. I go hard when I get into something. I get very focused on it and almost competitive, but not so much competitive with others, although that can happen, but competitive with myself. And I think that me and addiction, I don't even know that I would call it that anymore. Although at the time, I think that was the best terminology to use to explain it to other people at the time. It was more I wanted to go hard, and I wanted to see how far I could take things, and I wanted to find the rules and the boundaries of everything that I could. What can I get away with? What can I not get away with? What are the real consequences? And one thing my parents really did through that whole time period was I had done so much emotional damage to them through my actions. They were so emotionally distraught with the actions that I was taking that they finally went and got some help for themselves, because they kept trying to take me to treatment. I went to rehabs, I went to counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists and put her on this medication. And my mom was against me taking medication, but at some point you're like, oh my gosh, my kid is broken. Like, we've tried everything. Like, fine, give her drugs, fine, give her Lexapro and Seroquel and what's the other ones? Is it Depakote? Or I don't even remember. Like, all the things. And because at first it was, oh, she's bipolar. Oh, she's depressed. Oh, she's this, she's that. I don't even remember all the things that they told me I was. And I think I remember after that, after my parents taking my psychiatrist, which my mom, I know, was totally very, very against. My mom's always been like brown paper bags at the grocery store, hippy dippy Ojai, very all natural. She doesn't like taking medications unless she always uses it as the last line of defense. Try all natural first kind of mindset. And so I know her doing that and then taking me to a psychiatrist and putting me on meds was really something she didn't want to do. And I think it was after that, then she went and got help for herself. And of course dragged my dad along, and my dad just kind of does whatever my mom does. And that's when things started changing for the better, actually. because I think it's because I needed to feel the actual consequences of this world and of this life, especially as a young person, and go to jail and stay in jail and get myself out of jail and be on probation. And if I messed up on probation, like nobody to bail me out, and just things like that. And so I know I jumped ahead a little bit, but again, my intention in this is to give some tools to like what actually worked for me and what my thoughts were and what helped me get traction to get out of it. So back to 6th grade, cigarettes, a little drinking here and there, maybe a little weed or crap weed, or trying to smoke oregano and stupid shit like that. And then 7th grade was more of that, just amped up, more frequency, more often, finding more friends that do that or can get, things, and basically doing it at my friends' houses. Then 8th grade was more of the same. 9th grade was, I felt completely lost. High school was not a match for me. It was too much, too big, too many kids, too much of a change maybe for me, going from like a smaller school. My middle school wasn't tiny, but it wasn't big either. Maybe it was at double the size. Yeah, basically double the sizes of your school. And just being around kids that were that much older, I felt like I had to be an adult, I think, all of a sudden. Like, here I was with, like, kids that were basically 18. And you're just like, whoa. It's like such a huge difference, like a 9th grader to a 12th grader. And I think my defense mechanisms really kicked in, and I was scared. I did a little bit of sports. I was okay, but I didn't dedicate myself to sports like you should if you want to be good at something. Instead, I dedicated myself to parties and trying to find the best party, because they're out there somewhere, so why not just try to find the best one? And trying to find the best drugs, because they're out there, right? There's got to be like the best one or the best version of each kind. And going through that and figuring out how to drink absolutely the most that I could without blacking out, and enjoying it, and trying to figure all those and the mixtures out. Okay, this mixed with this and this mixed with that, and how does that work? And mushrooms and crack and meth and all the weed, which now is like nobody cares, but back then it was, finding fun strains was, people still do that now, but it was a lot more research and word of mouth went into it back then, before it was legalized. And I liked hard alcohol, definitely. And I realized that I had a high tolerance compared to other people my age, which actually served me really well. It protected me a lot, I think, in the situations that I put myself into. I put myself into some really bad situations as a child, By 16, I was like, whew, I was gone. I think the first time I ran away, was I 15 or 14? And when I mean like ran away, the first time I ran away, I was actually 5. I went to my friend's house and packed my shit and like sat on my friend's lawn till my parents came and found me. But the first time I like ran away for like days and weeks, maybe even months on end, I think I was 14 or 15. I was in high school, and I stayed at a hostel in San Diego, and we partied on the beach. And there was like amazing parts to that, and there were some like not amazing parts to that. And there were situations, again, because when you're buying drugs, you end up around gangs and gang culture and around people that are not the best, probably, for a young girl to be around. And I'm very fortunate that nothing happened, and that I held myself in a way that, and had learned to be smart enough to try to not hear things that I shouldn't be hearing, and try to respect people that I needed to respect, and not enrage people that shouldn't be enraged. So I think I've always been very good at reading people. My one fallacy I believe that I had before is to not judge a book by its cover. For some reason I had that in my head, don't judge a book by its cover. And I agree to some extent, if everybody's in a room and everybody's the same, and one guy isn't grinding his teeth and twitching and shouting incoherent, threatening sentences around, I need to judge that guy, right? Versus if everybody's calmly sitting in a room, everybody seems to be of sound mind, allow everyone space for non-judgment. But there are certainly times where you need to judge, and I think that I came at everything. I tried to put absolutes on everything. Never judge a book by its cover. It's like, okay, well, yeah, let's judge the guy that's, obviously not well and erratic and violent and possibly schizophrenic. Like, let's judge that in order to survive another day. So I learned that certainly in that phase of my life. Some crazy stories, just being in Ventura around, certain gangs and things like that, in rooms that I shouldn't be in, around Rottweilers that were high on speed, and guys that were high on fucking PCP and speed and meth, and trying to get drugs from them, and just other situations later on that I got into with other kind of fringe gang activities. So not that I never participated, I was never a part of it. It's just, it was part of that culture in LA, and Ventura and Oxnard. And, at that time, like I said, because it is illegal and I was using underage, even with alcohol, like, you end up in these situations of, criminal activity, right? So did all that, tried rehab several times, I've been arrested 12 different times before I was even turning 18. And then and I was really into the punk rock scene. I just loved punk rock and heavy metal, and parties, and I would go to raves every once in a while too, just because it was a fun thing to do. And I just wanted to experience all these different cultures and what different people were into musically. And I was in the perfect place to do it. Santa Barbara had some amazing music coming out at that time. Isla Vista was popping with, this is before a lot of the regulations were out. Frat parties, you'd have like Face to Face, and, just these really great bands. Rich Kids on LSD, KLSD, I think, is, just like all these local bands, the Nardcore stuff that I think I talked about before. Orange County was right there, just all sorts of, Mike Ness was living down there. The social distortion culture, the Long Beach, that's where Gwen Stefani and, no, she was Orange maybe. I don't know, but she was in, like, really alongside Sublime. So there was a big reggae and ska culture. Hollywood was a hub. The clubs every night would have, amazing music. You could just really throw a rock and find a place to go for the night and find some really cool small, intimate concerts and live music and parties. And sometimes there's just even cover bands, really great cover bands. So had a great time for the most part up until, was I 17, maybe 18, 17, 18. It, you know, it was just slowly getting darker and darker and darker. I had like blips of dark before. And then, you know, I had just, I kept getting clean and then relapsing, getting clean and relapsing, and going on probation and relapsing and getting arrested, running away again. And one of my friends that I talked to the other day, she goes, I just remember, you know, Melissa would be hanging out and she'd be around every day and we'd be having fun. And the next thing you know, Melissa's gone. Melissa's on an adventure, you know, somewhere. So it's interesting to talk to other people that knew me at that time and know me now and hear what they have to say about that version of myself. But we took off. I had met this guy. He had a Misfits tattoo on his neck. I thought, wow, you know, love of my life, right? And so we took off and went all across the country, from Orange County, San Francisco, Washington, Oregon, jet down to Texas, over to Florida, then back to Arkansas. I think we were in Texas, and there was a dry county. And I mean, this took months. This whole travel routine took months. And we were just going to go around and party and do drugs and drink and have a great time and just see the country, right? Like that was the idyllic, that was how we talked ourselves into going. And it turned into just every day he got worse and worse and I got worse and worse and things got harder and harder and less fun. And, I mean, it was, yeah, I've slept on, it started out like kind of cool, like in Santa Cruz. We went to a punk rock concert and then ended up sleeping on the roof that night, you know, looking at the stars. And we had met some friends and we were drinking and smoking up there all night. So anything from that to ending up in Florida and around stupid people that we didn't understand, like the culture out there, and ended up getting shot at, you know, all to try to get drugs. Like just some interesting situations and interesting people in Florida. Gotta love Florida. My best friend lives in Florida. So that's always an interesting, definitely different than LA, right? Anyway, so we ended up in a dry county in Texas, and we of course needed to get some alcohol. So we said, F this county. We started talking to people, where's the nearest county that we can buy liquor? And I think it was in like it was in Arkansas or something like that. We had to cross a border to, all I know is we ended up in West Memphis, Arkansas. That's all I know. And he bought like natty, like natural ice, right? Or something, like super cheap beer, and I think a flask of something. And we were driving somewhere. I don't know what we were going to do. I think we were going to park somewhere, maybe drink, and nothing super spectacular. And we were driving, and I didn't do what he wanted me to do. I didn't take the right exit. I'm like, who cares? Like, we're not late to anything. We're not working. Like, what's the big deal? I missed the exit. I'll turn around, you know? Like, relax, bro. And he started flipping out and cussing at me and told me he was going to kill me. So I said, okay, fine. If you're going to kill me, then I'm just going to floor my car until I wasn't saying this calmly. I was basically shouting at him that we were going to get pulled over and he's going to go to jail. I'm like, okay. So I just remember flooring at a little Toyota Celica, flooring my little car as a stick shift, a 5-speed. And obviously I was in 5th gear. I think it was 5-speed. I don't think it was 6-speed. 6-speeds weren't that common back then. Anyway, 5-speed, and I know for sure I was going over 100 miles an hour. I just remember flooring my little car. I think it redlined, the speedometer went to like 130-ish, maybe 125, 135, somewhere in there. And so I know for sure I was going over 100. It might have been like 110. And because I wasn't flooring it for very long. I was yelling at him that we're going to get pulled over because I'm speeding. And it was, and he basically reaches over, grabs the wheel, pulls it at like this, like full whoopah. And obviously we went off the road. I didn't spin out. I just remember trying to control the car, and we were going through weeds, and I just remember these weeds, and it was dark, and so all I could see was my little lights, my little flip-up lights, like going through the weeds, and I had the clutch in. I think I got it out of gear, and it was down, figuring out what gear to put it in, and then there was a wall, and that's the last thing I remember. So we hit a brick wall. The police officer that came upon the scene, he said, I just remember him opening the door and be like, oh my God, you guys are alive. Like, it did not, because we went partially through the brick wall, and he said, I thought for sure I was going to be coming up on dead bodies here. Obviously, then the ambulance showed up. They cut us out. They cut off the seatbelt. He had already rolled out because I was hitting him. He had, we hit, the airbags went off. And I was like, you dumb person. And then he goes, ugh, and just rolls out of the car. And I'm like, man, this is like, what an idiot. And I just remember cussing at him like, like, why would you do that? Like, this, now we're both going to go to jail. And like, all because I missed like, whatever, I just remember calling him every name in the book. I was so mad. And I was fine. I remember the airbag went off. My face hurt a little bit. And obviously I was like sore. But I didn't roll out. I just sat there and waited for the ambulance. The ambulance came and helped me get out, put me on a stretcher. They cut they didn't let me move, I don't think. And I was kind of in and out because I was in shock, I think. And I think I hit my head on the airbag. I just remember they cut my pants open to see if my legs were broken, because you would think that this little tiny Toyota hitting a brick wall at 80 miles an hour, because they checked the skid marks. They're like, we know for sure it was at least 80 based off the skid marks. They got me in there. They of course were asking me, did you do this? Did you do that? Are you on the influence? This, because they're trying to get you to go to get tickets for you. They're trying to criminally charge you, right? And so I just knew not to say anything. I'm like, I just didn't say anything. And I just remember sitting there just so over everything. I was like, this is just the dumbest situation ever. So stupid. Not at all what I talked myself into. And I didn't even really ask myself, how did I get here? I mean, of course I knew how I got there. I was being an idiot. And they carted me off to jail. They let him go. I guess the laws are different there than in California. Obviously I was underage. I was 18, just barely 18. And he was 26. And obviously he bought the alcohol, but that doesn't matter. Because I was the one driving. It was my car and I was in possession of it. So, and he was on parole. And I guess Arkansas doesn't communicate with California. So they didn't even arrest him for that. So they just let him go. And they let him take all the shit out of my car. I was so mad. He had a whole carton of cigarettes. I was most upset about that. And I think we had like $100 or like $150 cash and they let him take it and just go. I was like, I couldn't believe that. Anyway, So I go to jail and I'm in this holding cell, and they kept me in the holding cell the whole time, and they kept asking me, where's your family? Give us a number. And I wouldn't give them a number. I wouldn't tell them who my parents were. I just wanted to sit there. I'm like, I'll just do my time. I can't pay the thing. And they're like, they kept trying to get me to basically have somebody come bail me out, because they didn't want me there. They wanted to get me back to California. They didn't want the expense of me there. I was, obviously I broke a toe. So they took me to the hospital. My toe came through the bottom of my foot, and that was it. It was the only broken bone I had after all that. But I still had some swelling, and, they were giving me Vicodin for the pain, thank God. And they didn't want to have to deal with me anymore, taking me to the doctor, all this extra liability basically for this little tiny jail in West Memphis, Arkansas. And I think I was in there like a week, something like that. And the sheriff came in, and he's like, I want you to come to my office. I went to my office. He's like, I finally found someone. I looked this up, he was very proud of himself. I guess big detective work. Last name's Vang, not super common. But he found my uncle, and then my uncle called my parents, then my parents called the thing, and then my parents came and got me and went to my court case and got me out and got me back home. And so I ended up staying with them and with an ankle bracelet and going into drug court. And I think I relapsed a couple of times in drug court, but eventually got clean and stayed clean. So that's my story. I attribute a lot of that to going really hard. I did a lot of stupid things really young and decided that I wouldn't do those things anymore, and worked on myself, became more mindful of my thoughts and my actions, and lots of counseling. I did do 12-step programs for 10 years. I mean, I think I was 14 when I first got on probation. And they make you go to meetings. So I started going to meetings then. Then I went to Chapman in Orange County, and went to rehab there. I really liked the counselors there, and they took us to some cool meetings. That was one thing that really helped me as a young person, is finding other young people in AA and NA. So it's Young People's Narcotics Anonymous, Young People's AA, and they had lots of conventions, and there were conventions where they would have a DJ in one room and a live band in another, and a poker room and a blackjack, and obviously a coffee and a smoking area, and activity, things for everybody to do. One was in Palm Springs, and there were, obviously gambling. All these addicts are like running around smoking and gambling. But that was a relatively safe place that I could hang out with people that were in the fringes of culture and could talk about the music that I like to talk about. And I could relate to these people as far as the interests that they had, artistically and expressively, and the depth that they thought about things, and the emotional depth of an addict that's clean and have experienced things. I really needed that. I really needed that period of my life. And I still have one friend left from that period of my life. Friends have passed away. I had young friends that never got clean that passed away. And I've had people that I knew in Narcotics Anonymous and AA that passed away. And I ended up meeting my husband in Narcotics Anonymous at a convention in Ventura. Obviously, we didn't know we were going to get married, but it's been a part of my life, and it's a big part of my story. I don't use it anymore. It got to the point when I decided I needed to stop smoking cigarettes, that it didn't serve me anymore. It wasn't helping me it was hurting me and my ability to stop smoking, because I loved going to meetings and sitting outside and drinking caffeinated beverages, whether it's coffee or energy drinks, and smoking cigarettes and talking to everybody and being really hyper and excited about things that I was talking about. I loved that. And it was a big trigger for me, because I would go and I would be like, oh, I want to go out there with everybody and have a cigarette and just, I mean, I loved it. I loved smoking. Smoking was, it was always there. That's the thing they say about addicts, and either it's your drink or your cigarette or your weed or your, whatever you're decided to be addicted to. And this really resonated with me for smoking, I think, more than anything. It's your friend. It's there to comfort you when no one else is. It's always going to give you a boost. It's more reliable than people. And people disappoint you, and emotions disappoint you, and you disappoint yourself. But at least you have that cigarette, that moment that you get to have that cigarette and take a break and have that enjoyment. So I had to put myself in situations that I knew would help me find other things that would bring me that level of joy. And one of those is a dog. A dog is unconditional love, and it can interact with you. A cigarette can't interact with you. A dog doesn't give you cancer. A dog doesn't give you COPD. A dog makes you go on walks. It makes you be healthy. So I've found other things, like the gym, of course. Oh my gosh. When I quit smoking, I did dive into the gym, and that would be kind of my next obsession. Fitness, nutrition, and like I said, I've always had that characteristic where when I get into something, I want to be really good at it. And I wanted to be really good at partying, and I wanted to be really good at drinking and doing drugs. But how committed I was to that took me down a dark path. And now, I've repositioned myself to say, okay, now I want to learn everything I can about health and fitness and nutrition. And I went through that transformation. Now I have that knowledge and those positive associations with going to the gym. That's my break. Eating good food makes me feel good. Getting my vitamins dialed in. I know those are all dialed in because I've gotten my blood work done and my hormones checked, and, taking all that my health is a very high priority, because if I don't have that, I can't be there for the ones I love. And so I've gotten that under my belt. I'll always be interested in health and nutrition. It's just not my focus right now. And now I'm learning more about business and running my business and how to grow a business and how to market and sell. And, I'm diving into deep on those topics now. So these are all things that I've been thinking about lately, which is the whole point of these videos, is reflections. Hopefully that helps someone out there that needs to hear, or maybe going through something like this, or knows a young person that's using and they don't know why. And of course, if you have any questions or you want me to expand on something, make a comment or reach out to me. I'll do what I can to help. And thank you for hanging out until the end, and we'll see you next time.